The dusty wind swept across the Kansas plains as Xander Graves rode into the Great Bend Cemetery that scorching afternoon in July 1878, his horse tired from a long day's work. And there she was, a woman in a simple black dress kneeling before a wooden cross, her shoulders shaking with sobs that tore through the silence like thunder. He had not intended to stop. The Graves ranch needed tending and supplies needed hauling back from town, but something about her grief pulled at him like a rope around his chest. Xander dismounted slowly, his boots crunching on the dry grass, and he removed his hat as he approached with careful, measured steps. She did not notice him at first, too lost in whatever memories held her captive. Her honey-colored hair fell loose from its pins, cascading down her back in waves that caught the afternoon light. When she finally sensed his presence and turned, he saw eyes the color of spring rain, red-rimmed and glistening with tears that streaked through the dust on her face. "I apologize for intruding, miss," Xander said quietly, his voice rough from years of shouting orders across open ranges. "I could not help but notice your sorrow." She wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand, trying to compose herself but failing. "You need not concern yourself with me, sir. I am just paying respects. That may be true, but nobody should grieve alone." He looked down at the grave marker, reading the name carved into the wood, Daniel Thompson, 1848–1878. "Your husband, my brother," she whispered, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. "He was shot 3 weeks ago. Some drifters came through town, started trouble at the saloon. Daniel tried to stop them, tried to protect others, and they killed him for it. He was only 30 years old. I have no one left now. Our parents died of fever 5 years back. Daniel was all I had." Xander felt something crack open inside his chest. He knew loneliness, knew loss, though his own wounds were older and had scarred over with time. "What is your name?" "Beatrice Thompson," she said, looking up at him with those rain-colored eyes. "Beatrice, I know words cannot ease your pain. I know nothing I say will bring your brother back or fill the emptiness he left behind, but I have learned something in my years walking this earth." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Grief will consume you if you let it. It will take root in your heart and grow like weeds until there is nothing left but sorrow. Your brother, he died protecting others. That speaks to the kind of man he was. Do you think he would want you kneeling here, drowning in tears until you waste away?" Beatrice shook her head slowly. "No. He would not." "Then let me give you new reasons to smile," Xander said, the words coming from somewhere deep and honest within him. "I cannot replace your brother. I cannot bring him back or undo what has been done, but I can help you remember what it feels like to find joy again. Life is too precious and too short to spend it all in mourning." She stared at him for a long moment, this stranger with dark hair and eyes like storm clouds, with strong hands and a weathered face that spoke of hard work and harder years. There was kindness in his expression, something genuine that she had not expected to find. "Why would you do that for me? You do not even know me." "Maybe that is exactly why," Xander replied. "Sometimes strangers can help us in ways those close to us cannot. They have no history with our pain, no expectations of who we should be. They just see who we are in this moment." Beatrice stood slowly, her legs stiff from kneeling so long. She brushed the dirt from her dress and looked once more at her brother's grave before turning her full attention to Xander. "What did you have in mind?" He had not thought that far ahead, had spoken from impulse rather than plan, but now he found himself saying, "Come work at my ranch. I need help with the books, with organizing supplies, with 100 small tasks that keep getting pushed aside because I am always tending cattle or fixing fences. You would have a place to stay, honest work to occupy your mind, and people around you instead of spending your days alone with ghosts." "I do not know anything about ranching," she said hesitantly. "You do not need to. I have ranch hands for the hard labor. I need someone with a clear head and attention to detail. Your brother ran the general store, did he not? I remember seeing him there when I came into town." "Yes, he did. I helped him with the inventory and the accounts." Her voice grew stronger as she spoke of practical matters, the tears finally slowing. "Then you have exactly the skills I need. The ranch is half a day's ride from here. Good land, decent house, honest work. I can pay you fair wages and you would have your own room. It would give you a fresh start, somewhere new where everything does not remind you of your loss." Beatrice considered this offer, weighing it against her other options, which were painfully few. The store had been sold to pay off Daniel's debts. She had been staying with the preacher's family, but she could not impose on their charity forever. She had nowhere to go, no prospects, no future that she could see through the fog of her grief. "When would I start?" she asked. "Tomorrow, if you are willing. I can take you back into town now, let you gather your things and say your goodbyes. We can head out at first light." She nodded slowly, then more firmly. "All right. Yes, I will do it." Xander felt relief wash through him, though he could not quite name why this mattered so much. Perhaps it was simply that he recognized her pain and wanted to do something good, something kind in a world that often felt cruel and indifferent. He helped her onto his horse, then mounted behind her, trying to ignore the way her hair smelled like lavender despite the dust and tears. They rode back into Great Bend as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The town was small but bustling, with wooden buildings lining the main street and people going about their evening business. The saloon was already filling with ranch hands and drifters, their laughter and piano music spilling out into the street. Beatrice looked away from it, her jaw tight. "That is where it happened," she said quietly, "where Daniel was shot." "I am sorry," Xander said, and meant it. He took her to the preacher's house, a neat little building beside the white-painted church. Reverend Mitchell and his wife Hannah greeted them at the door, surprised to see Beatrice with a stranger but welcoming nonetheless. "This is Xander Graves," Beatrice explained. "He has offered me work at his ranch. I will be leaving tomorrow." Hannah Mitchell's eyebrows rose. "So soon?" "Are you certain, dear? You have been through so much." "That is exactly why I need to go," Beatrice said. "I cannot stay here. Everything reminds me of Daniel. I need a change, need to find a way to move forward." The Reverend looked at Xander with careful scrutiny. "I know of you, Mr. Graves. You have a good reputation. You treat your workers fairly and keep your word, but I must ask your intentions toward Miss Thompson." "Purely professional," Xander assured him. "She needs work and a fresh start. I need someone to help run the business side of the ranch. That is all." Beatrice felt a small pang at those words, though she could not say why. Of course it was purely professional. What else would it be? They had just met. She barely knew this man. She went inside to pack her few belongings while Xander waited on the porch, talking quietly with the Reverend about weather and cattle prices and the state of things in Kansas. When she emerged with a single worn carpetbag containing everything she owned in the world, Xander felt a surge of protectiveness toward this woman who had lost so much. "I will take good care of her," he promised the Mitchells. "You have my word." "See that you do," Hannah said, embracing Beatrice tightly. "You are always welcome back here if you need us." Xander secured a room for Beatrice at the town's modest hotel, paying for it himself despite her protests. "You start work tomorrow," he said. "Tonight you rest and prepare yourself. I will meet you here at dawn." She watched him ride away into the gathering darkness, this cowboy who had appeared like something out of a dream and offered her a lifeline when she had been drowning. She did not know if she was making a wise decision or a reckless one, but anything felt better than staying here, trapped in her grief with no way forward. That night she barely slept, her mind racing with questions and possibilities. What would the ranch be like? What would her work entail? And more pressingly, who was Xander Graves really? He had been kind to her, yes, but she knew nothing about him beyond his name and his offer of work. She could be riding into danger or difficulty, could be making a terrible mistake. But when dawn broke and she met him outside the hotel as promised, those doubts began to fade. He had brought a wagon instead of riding horseback, the bed filled with supplies from town, and a blanket-covered seat for her that looked considerably more comfortable than riding all day. "Good morning," he said, his voice warm despite the early hour. "Are you ready?" "As ready as I will ever be," Beatrice replied, letting him help her up onto the wagon seat. They headed out of Great Bend as the town was just beginning to wake, the sun casting long shadows across the plains. The landscape stretched endlessly in all directions, golden grassland rippling in the breeze like waves on an ocean. Beatrice had lived in Kansas all her life but had rarely ventured far from town, and the sheer vastness of it all took her breath away. "It is beautiful," she said softly. "It is," Xander agreed. "Harsh sometimes, unforgiving but beautiful. You learn to appreciate it when you spend your days out here. The way the light changes with the seasons, the way storms roll in across the plains, the sound of absolutely nothing but wind and grass. It gets into your blood." "How long have you had the ranch?" "8 years now. I bought it when I was 22 with money I had saved from working other people's land. Started small, just a few head of cattle and big dreams. Built it up slowly, year by year. Now I've got 200 head, 5 ranch hands, and enough land to support twice that many cattle if I wanted to expand." "That is impressive," Beatrice said, genuinely meaning it. She could hear the pride in his voice, the satisfaction of building something with his own hands and determination. "It has not been easy," Xander admitted. "There have been years where I thought I might lose everything. Drought, disease, cattle thieves, you name it. But I am stubborn. I do not give up easily." They rode in comfortable silence for a while, the wagon wheels creaking rhythmically, and the horses, hooves clopping steadily against the packed earth of the trail. Beatrice found herself studying Xander from the corner of her eye, noting the strong line of his jaw, the way his hands held the reins with easy confidence, the way he squinted slightly against the sun. He looked to be in his early 30s, weathered but not old, strong but not harsh. "Why did you stop at the cemetery yesterday?" she asked suddenly. "You said you had not intended to. What made you?" Xander was quiet for a moment, considering his answer. "Honestly, I do not rightly know. Something pulled me there. I saw you from the road and something in my chest just said stop, go to her, do not leave her alone. I have learned to listen to those instincts." "I am glad you did," Beatrice said quietly. "I do not know how much longer I would have stayed there if you had not come. I was lost in it, drowning in grief and guilt and loneliness." "Guilt?" Xander glanced at her. "Why would you feel guilty?" "Because I was not there when it happened. I had gone to visit Hannah Mitchell, was helping her with her garden. If I had been at the store with Daniel, if I had been there, maybe I could have stopped him from going to the saloon. Maybe I could have talked him out of getting involved. Maybe he would still be alive. Or maybe you would both be dead," Xander said bluntly. "Beatrice, you cannot think that way. You cannot torture yourself with maybes and what-ifs. Your brother made a choice to stand up for what was right, to protect others. That was his decision, not yours to make or prevent. And the only people who bear guilt for his death are the men who pulled the triggers." She nodded, throat tight with emotion. Intellectually, she knew he was right, but emotionally, she could not quite let go of the feeling that she should have been there, should have done something. "Were they caught?" Xander asked. "The men who shot him?" "No. They rode out of town immediately after. The sheriff formed a posse but lost their trail. They are gone, likely hundreds of miles away by now." Bitterness crept into her voice. Daniel's death means nothing to them, just another body left behind in another forgotten town. "His death means something," Xander said firmly. "It means something to you. It means something to everyone in Great Bend who knew him as a good man. It means something to the people he saved by standing up to those drifters. Do not let their cruelty diminish his sacrifice." Beatrice felt tears prick her eyes again but blinked them back. She had cried enough. It was time to start finding her way forward, difficult as that seemed. As the morning wore into afternoon, the landscape gradually changed. The flat grasslands gave way to rolling hills, and scattered trees appeared along a creek that wound through the territory. Xander pointed out landmarks, telling her stories about the land and the people who worked it. She listened, grateful for the distraction and the glimpse into this world she was entering. "There," Xander said finally, pointing ahead to where buildings appeared in a shallow valley. "That is home." The ranch was more substantial than Beatrice had expected. The main house was a sturdy two-story structure built from local stone and timber, with a wide porch wrapping around the front and side. Nearby stood a large barn, several smaller outbuildings, and a bunkhouse for the ranch hands. Corrals held horses and cattle, and she could see men moving about, tending to various tasks. As they approached, several ranch hands stopped their work to watch. Xander pulled the wagon up in front of the house and jumped down, then came around to help Beatrice descend. She felt suddenly self-conscious under the scrutiny of strangers, aware of her worn dress and disheveled appearance after the long journey. "Everyone, this is Miss Beatrice Thompson," Xander announced. "She will be helping run the office side of things, managing supplies and accounts. I expect you all to treat her with respect and help her learn the workings of the ranch." An older man with graying hair and a weathered face stepped forward. "Welcome, Miss Thompson. I am Frank Garrison, the foreman here. Been working with Xander since he bought the place." "Pleased to meet you," Beatrice said, shaking his offered hand. The other ranch hands introduced themselves. Young Tommy Walsh, barely 20 and eager to please. Brothers Martin and Peter Schultz, solid workers in their 30s, and Carlos Mendez, a skilled horseman from Texas. They all seemed curious but friendly, and Beatrice felt some of her nervousness ease. Xander showed her into the house, carrying her carpet bag. The interior was surprisingly comfortable, with sturdy furniture and curtains at the windows, though it clearly lacked a woman's touch. Everything was functional but sparse, clean but impersonal. "Your room is upstairs," he said, leading her up a narrow staircase. He showed her into a decent-sized room with a bed, dresser, washstand, and window overlooking the front of the property. "It is not fancy, but it is private and the bed is comfortable. There is a bathing room down the hall. We have got running water from a cistern, one of the few luxuries I insisted on." "It is wonderful," Beatrice said honestly. After weeks of sleeping on a borrowed cot in the preacher's storage room, this felt like a palace. "Take some time to settle in, rest from the journey. I will have one of the men bring up hot water if you would like to wash up. Dinner is usually at sundown in the main dining room downstairs. Nothing fancy, but we eat well. Tomorrow I will show you the office and we can discuss your duties in detail." After he left, Beatrice sat on the edge of the bed and looked around her new room, her new life. It felt surreal, as if she had stepped out of one existence and into another completely different one in the span of a single day. Yesterday morning she had been kneeling at Daniel's grave, lost and hopeless. Now she was at a cattle ranch, employed and housed, with a future that was uncertain but at least existed. She thought about Xander's words at the cemetery. "Let me give you new reasons to smile." It had seemed impossible then, the idea that she could ever feel joy again. But maybe, just maybe, he was right. Maybe there was a way forward through the grief, a path back to something resembling happiness. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. "Miss Thompson, I have got hot water for you," came a young voice. "Come in," she called. Tommy entered with 2 steaming buckets, his face red from exertion. "Mr. Graves said you might want to wash up. There are towels and soap in the bathing room. It is just 3 doors down on the left." "Thank you, Tommy. That is very kind." He ducked his head, embarrassed. "It is no trouble, miss. We are all glad to have you here. Mr. Graves is a good man, but he has been trying to manage everything himself for too long. He needs help." After Tommy left, Beatrice gathered the clean clothes from her bag and made her way to the bathing room. It was simple but functional, with a large metal tub and hooks for hanging clothes. She poured in the hot water Tommy had brought, added cold water from the pump until the temperature was right, then stripped off her dusty traveling clothes and sank into the bath with a sigh of relief. As she washed away the grime and weariness, she let herself relax for the first time in weeks. The hot water eased muscles she had not realized were tense, and the simple act of caring for herself felt like a small step toward healing. She washed her hair thoroughly, scrubbing away the dust of the journey and the cemetery, letting the water carry away at least the physical remnants of her grief. When she finally emerged, clean and dressed in a simple blue cotton dress, she felt more like herself than she had since Daniel's death. She braided her hair loosely and made her way downstairs, following the smell of cooking food and the sound of male voices. The dining room held a large wooden table that could easily seat a dozen people. Several of the ranch hands were already there, cleaned up from their day's work, and they stood respectfully when she entered. "Please sit," she said, feeling awkward with the formality. "I do not want to disrupt your normal routine." "You are not disrupting anything," Frank assured her, pulling out a chair. "We are just pleased to have better company than these ugly fellows." That drew laughter from the others, breaking the ice. Xander arrived moments later, carrying platters of food from the kitchen. Beatrice moved to help, but he waved her back to her seat. "Tonight you rest, tomorrow you work. That is the deal." Dinner was hearty and plentiful. Beefsteak, beans, fresh bread, and vegetables from a garden she had glimpsed behind the house. The men ate with enthusiasm, their conversation ranging from cattle prices to weather predictions to good-natured ribbing about who had done what during the day's work. Beatrice found herself relaxing into the atmosphere, the easy camaraderie reminding her of dinners at the store with Daniel, when neighbors would stop by and stay for a meal. The pain of that memory was sharp, but no longer unbearable. Maybe this was what healing looked like, being able to remember without being destroyed by the remembering. "How was your journey, Miss Thompson?" Carlos asked. "The road from Great Bend can be rough." "It was fine, thank you. Mr. Graves made it as comfortable as possible." "Xander is good at that," Martin said. "Taking care of people. He runs a tight operation, but he is fair. You will do well here." After dinner, the ranch hands excused themselves to the bunkhouse, leaving Beatrice and Xander to clear the table. She helped despite his protests, needing something to do with her hands. "They seem like good men," she said as they worked. "They are. I have been lucky. Good workers are hard to find and harder to keep, but every one of them has been with me for at least 3 years. Frank has been here from the beginning. They are more than employees, they are friends. You cook for them every night. We take turns, actually. Everyone contributes, but yes, I often cook. I find it relaxing after a long day. Something about the simplicity of it, following a recipe, creating something tangible. It clears my mind. Beatrice found herself smiling at that. Daniel used to say the same thing about woodworking. He would spend hours in his workshop behind the store, carving and building. Said it helped him think. What did he make? All sorts of things. Furniture, toys for the local children, decorative pieces. He had real talent. Her voice caught slightly, but she pushed through. I still have a music box he made for my 20th birthday. It is in my bag upstairs. One of the few things I kept. I would like to see it sometime, if you are willing to share. They finished cleaning in comfortable silence. Then Xander showed her his office, a small room off the main hallway that was cluttered with papers, ledgers, receipts, and various other documents in varying states of organization. This is what I need help with, he admitted, looking almost embarrassed by the chaos. I can manage cattle and land and horses, but paperwork defeats me every time. I know what needs to be done, but I can never seem to stay on top of it. Beatrice looked at the mess with the eye of someone who had run a store's inventory for years. It was daunting but not impossible. I can work with this. It will take some time to sort through everything and set up a proper system, but it is manageable. That is good to hear. I was starting to worry I would be buried under paper one of these days. He paused, then added, Beatrice, I want you to know that you can take this at whatever pace you need. If you need time, if you have bad days, that is all right. The work will still be here. Your healing is more important. She looked at him, this man who was still essentially a stranger but who kept showing her unexpected kindness. Why are you doing this? Really? You could have hired anyone for this work. Why offer it to a grieving woman you found in a cemetery? Xander leaned against the desk, considering his answer carefully. Because I know what it is like to lose everything. I know what it is like to feel adrift with no anchor, no purpose, no reason to keep going. Someone helped me when I needed it most, gave me a chance when I had nothing. I am just passing that forward. What happened to you? That is a story for another time, he said gently, when we know each other better. For now, let's just say I understand loss and I understand the need for a fresh start. Beatrice nodded, accepting his boundaries even as her curiosity grew. There were depths to Xander Graves that she was only beginning to glimpse, layers of experience and pain that shaped the man he had become. I should let you get some rest, Xander said. Tomorrow will be a long day of learning how everything works. Sleep well, Beatrice. Good night, Xander, and thank you for everything. She climbed the stairs to her room, exhausted but somehow lighter than she had felt in weeks. As she prepared for bed, she opened her carpet bag and took out the music box Daniel had made her. It was small and beautifully crafted, with intricate carvings of flowers on the lid. She wound the key and opened it, listening to the delicate melody that emerged. Tears came as she had known they would, but they were softer now, gentler. She let herself cry for her brother, for all he had been, and all he would never have the chance to become. But she also let herself feel the smallest flicker of hope for her own future, for the possibility that maybe, just maybe, she could find her way back to happiness. The next morning, Beatrice woke to the sound of roosters crowing and men's voices calling to each other as they started their day's work. Sunlight streamed through her window, and for a moment she forgot where she was, panic seizing her as she looked around the unfamiliar room. Then memory returned, and with it, a sense of purpose she had not felt in far too long. She dressed quickly in a practical work dress, pinned her hair up neatly, and made her way downstairs. The kitchen was empty, but she found evidence of breakfast already eaten, dirty dishes in the sink and the lingering smell of coffee and bacon. A pot of oatmeal sat warming on the stove with a note propped against it. Help yourself. I am in the barn. Join me when you are ready. Xander after eating, Beatrice washed her dishes and went in search of Xander. The morning was already warm, promising another hot summer day. The barn was cool and dim by contrast, smelling of hay and horses and leather. She found Xander in one of the stalls, checking a horse's leg while speaking softly to the animal. "Good morning," she said from the doorway. He looked up and smiled, and Beatrice felt her heart skip unexpectedly at the warmth in his expression. "Morning. Sleep well." "Better than I have in weeks, actually. The quiet out here is different from town, more peaceful. It is one of the things I love most about this place, the peace." He finished with the horse and joined her. "Ready to learn the ins and outs of running a cattle ranch, as ready as I will ever be." Xander spent the morning showing her around the property, explaining how everything worked. She learned about the different breeds of cattle, the rotation of pastures, the management of water sources, the cycle of calving and selling. She met all the horses by name, learned which were for riding and which for working cattle. She saw the garden that supplied their vegetables, the chickens that provided eggs, the smokehouse where meat was preserved. Then they returned to the office, and Xander began the more tedious work of explaining the business side. There were ledgers for expenses and income, records of cattle sales and purchases, payroll information for the ranch hands, receipts for supplies bought in town, correspondence with cattle buyers in Kansas City, and even as far as Chicago. "It is a lot," Xander admitted, seeing her slightly overwhelmed expression. "But you do not need to master it all at once. Take your time, ask questions, organize it in whatever way makes sense to you. I trust your judgment." They worked side by side for hours, Beatrice making notes and asking clarifying questions while Xander patiently explained the details of how he had been managing things, or attempting to manage them, as became increasingly clear. His system, such as it was, relied heavily on memory and rough estimates rather than careful record-keeping. "You have been losing money," Beatrice said, frowning at the numbers in front of her. "Not much, but enough that it adds up over time. You are not tracking expenses carefully enough, so you do not see where the waste is happening." "Where is it happening?" Xander asked, leaning over her shoulder to look at the ledger. "Feed costs are higher than they should be. I think your supplier in Great Bend is overcharging you. And you are paying for repairs and equipment that could probably be handled by your ranch hands if they had the right tools on hand. You are spending money on services when you could be investing in equipment instead." Xander stared at the figures, seeing what she meant now that she had pointed it out. "How did I miss that? Because you are busy actually running the ranch. You cannot be everywhere at once. That is what I am here for now." She made more notes. "I will need to see your contracts with suppliers, and I want to inventory everything we have on hand so I know what we actually need versus what we have been buying out of habit." "You have been here less than a day and you have already found problems I have been overlooking for years," Xander said, shaking his head in amazement. "I knew I needed help, but I did not realize how badly. It is just a matter of attention to detail. You have been focused on the bigger picture, which is important, but the details matter too. They add up." They worked through lunch, Beatrice too absorbed in the puzzle of the ranch's finances to think about food until Xander insisted they take a break. He made sandwiches while she continued to study the ledgers, her mind racing with ideas for improving efficiency and reducing costs. "You need to eat," Xander said, setting a plate in front of her. "The numbers will still be there after you have had food." "Sorry," she said, looking up with a slight smile. "I get focused sometimes. Daniel used to have to remind me to eat when I was working on the store's accounts. It is a good quality, that focus. Just remember to take care of yourself too." As they ate, Xander asked her about her life in Great Bend, what it had been like growing up there, what she had done before working in the store. Beatrice found herself talking more freely than she had expected, telling him about her childhood, her parents, the small joys and sorrows of life in a plains town. "What about you?" she asked finally. "You promised to tell me your story eventually." Xander was quiet for a moment, his expression distant. "I was born in Missouri. My father was a farmer, tried to work land that was not really suitable for it. We struggled constantly. When I was 17, he died from an injury, a stupid accident that should not have killed him, but infection set in. My mother lasted another year before her heart just gave out. I think she died of grief and exhaustion as much as anything physical." "I am sorry," Beatrice said softly. "I sold the farm for what little I could get and headed west. Worked cattle drives, hired myself out to ranches, saved every penny. Met a girl in Abilene, thought I was in love. We were going to get married, start a life together. But she decided I did not have enough to offer her and ran off with a banker instead." He said it matter-of-factly, but Beatrice heard the old pain underneath. "That was when I realized I needed to build something of my own, something that could not be taken away. So I bought this land and started over. How long ago was that? With the girl, I mean, 9 years. I was 21 and stupid enough to think heartbreak was the worst thing that could happen to a person." He met her eyes. "I know better now. Real loss, the kind you have experienced, is far worse than a broken romance. But at the time it felt like the end of the world. Grief is grief," Beatrice said. "You do not need to diminish your pain because you think someone else has suffered more. That is wise advice. You should take it yourself." She smiled at that, recognizing the gentle challenge. "I am trying. Being here helps. Having work to focus on, people around me, a purpose. You were right about that." The afternoon passed in more work, more explanations, more notes and plans. By the time dinner rolled around, Beatrice had a reasonable grasp of how the ranch operated, and several ideas for improving its efficiency. The ranch hands joined them for the evening meal, and this time Beatrice felt more comfortable, participating in the conversation and even laughing at Frank's stories about past cattle drives. After dinner, as the sun began to set and paint the sky in brilliant colors, Xander invited her to walk with him. They strolled away from the buildings, into the grassland where the evening breeze was cool and sweet. "Thank you for today," Beatrice said, "for giving me this chance. I feel more like myself than I have in weeks. Thank you for taking it. You have already proven invaluable." He paused, then added, "I hope this is not too forward, but I find myself very glad you are here, not just because of the work, though that is certainly appreciated, but because I enjoy your company." Beatrice felt warmth spread through her chest at his words. "I enjoy yours as well. You have been extraordinarily kind to me." They walked in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars begin to appear in the darkening sky. Beatrice realized with some surprise that she felt peaceful for the first time since Daniel's death. The grief was still there, would always be there in some form, but it no longer consumed her entirely. There was room now for other feelings, other experiences. "Xander," she said quietly, "when you said you would give me new reasons to smile, I did not really believe it was possible. But today I smiled. Several times, actually. I did not think I would ever do that again." He stopped walking and turned to face her. In the fading light, his features were shadowed, but she could see the sincerity in his eyes. "That is just the beginning, Beatrice. There are so many reasons to smile waiting for you, so many good things still to experience. I meant what I said. I will help you find them." She felt tears prick her eyes, but for once they were not entirely born of sadness. I believe you." The days turned into weeks, and Beatrice settled into life at the ranch with surprising ease. She woke early, had breakfast with Xander and whichever ranch hands were around, then spent her mornings in the office tackling the mountain of paperwork and organization. Afternoons, she often spent visiting suppliers in town or inspecting various aspects of the ranch operation to better understand how everything worked together. She renegotiated contracts with several suppliers, saving the ranch significant money. She created a comprehensive inventory system that tracked everything from nails to cattle feed. She established a better filing system for important documents and set up a schedule for regular financial reviews. The office transformed from chaos to order, and Xander's stress level decreased noticeably. But more than the work, it was the daily interactions with Xander that began to change things for Beatrice. They fell into an easy rhythm, working together in the office or eating meals together, talking about everything from serious matters to silly observations. He made her laugh with dry humor and unexpected observations. She challenged him to think differently about problems. They debated politics and philosophy, shared stories from their pasts, discussed dreams for the future. Beatrice found herself watching for him, listening for his footsteps, looking forward to the moments when he would stop by the office just to check on her or share some small bit of news. She noticed details about him. The way he pushed his hair back when he was thinking, the half-smile that meant he was amused but trying not to show it, the gentleness with which he handled everything from nervous horses to delicate correspondence. And increasingly, she found herself wondering if he felt the same growing attraction she did. One evening in late August, nearly 6 weeks after her arrival, Xander knocked on the door of her room. When she answered, he looked almost nervous. "There is a dance in Great Bend this Saturday," he said. "The town holds one every few months. I was wondering if you would like to go. With me, I mean, as my guest." Beatrice felt her heart race. "Are you asking me to accompany you to a social event?" "I am. I know you might not feel ready for that sort of thing yet, and if you are not, that is perfectly all right. But I thought, if you were interested, it might be nice. A chance to see people from town, hear some music, maybe even dance a little." She considered it carefully. Part of her wanted to say no, to keep herself isolated and protected from too much social interaction. But another part, the part that was slowly healing and learning to live again, wanted to say yes. "I would like that," she said. "Thank you for asking." His face lit up with genuine pleasure. "Good. That is good. We will leave Saturday morning, take care of some ranch business in town, and stay for the dance in the evening. I will get us rooms at the hotel for the night so we do not have to ride back in the dark." Saturday arrived with perfect weather, warm but not oppressively hot. Beatrice dressed carefully in her best dress, a deep green cotton that brought out the color of her eyes. She pinned her hair up in a more elaborate style than her usual practical braid, and even added the cameo brooch that had belonged to her mother. When she came downstairs, Xander was waiting by the wagon, also dressed more formally than usual in clean trousers, a pressed shirt, and a vest. He stared at her for a moment before seeming to collect himself. "You look beautiful," he said simply. "Thank you, you look very handsome yourself." The ride to Great Bend was pleasant, filled with easy conversation and comfortable silences. When they arrived, Xander handled his business efficiently at the bank and the feed store while Beatrice visited with Hannah Mitchell, who was delighted to see her looking so much healthier and happier. "The ranch life agrees with you," Hannah observed, "and if I may say so, Mr. Graves seems like a very good man." "He is," Beatrice agreed, unable to keep the warmth from her voice. "Are you sweet on him?" Beatrice felt her cheeks heat. "I do not know, maybe. Is that wrong?" It has not even been 2 months since Daniel died. Hannah took her hands gently. Beatrice, there is no correct timeline for grief or for healing. Your brother loved you and wanted you to be happy. He would not want you to spend the rest of your life alone out of some misplaced sense of loyalty to his memory. If Xander makes you happy, if he treats you well, that is what matters. The dance was held in the largest barn in town, cleared of hay and livestock for the occasion. Lanterns hung from the rafters, casting warm light over the crowd of townspeople and ranch families who had come from miles around. A small band played lively fiddle music, and people were already dancing when Beatrice and Xander arrived. Several people came over to greet Beatrice, expressing sympathy for her loss and pleasure at seeing her doing well. She was touched by their kindness, by the genuine care in their words. Small towns had their drawbacks, but the closeness of community was not one of them. When the band struck up a waltz, Xander offered his hand. "May I have this dance?" Beatrice let him lead her onto the floor, suddenly nervous. She had not danced since before her parents died, had almost forgotten the steps. But Xander was a confident lead, guiding her smoothly through the movements, and after a moment her body remembered what her mind had forgotten. They moved together naturally, as if they had been dancing together for years rather than for the first time. Beatrice was intensely aware of his hand on her waist, of his fingers intertwined with hers, of how close they were and how right it felt. "You are a good dancer," she said, surprised. "My mother insisted on teaching me. Said a man who could not dance was only half civilized." He twirled her gently, making her laugh. "I think she hoped it would help me find a wife. Did it work?" "Not yet," he said, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. They danced several more times throughout the evening, but Beatrice also danced with other men, including Frank, who had come into town with some of the other ranch hands. She laughed and talked and felt more alive than she had in months. But it was Xander she kept coming back to. Xander whose company she sought. Xander who made her heart race with just a smile. Late in the evening they stepped outside for some fresh air. The music was muffled now, just a pleasant backdrop to the sound of crickets and the distant lowing of cattle. The moon was nearly full, casting silver light over the quiet street. "Are you having a good time?" Xander asked. "A wonderful time. Thank you for bringing me. I am glad. I have wanted to ask you something." He seemed to gather his courage. "Beatrice, these past weeks, working with you, getting to know you, have been some of the best of my life. I find myself thinking about you constantly, looking forward to seeing you, wanting to share things with you, caring about your happiness more than I care about my own." Her heart was pounding now, anticipation and hope swirling together. "What I am trying to say, badly, is that I have developed very strong feelings for you. Romantic feelings. I am falling in love with you, Beatrice Thompson, and I needed you to know that." She stared at him, this good man who had appeared when she needed him most, who had offered her not just work and shelter but genuine care and friendship. This man who made her laugh and challenged her mind and made her feel safe and valued. "I have feelings for you too," she admitted. "I have been trying not to acknowledge them, thinking it was too soon, that I should still be focused entirely on grieving Daniel. But Hannah reminded me today that there is no perfect timeline for healing, no right or wrong way to move forward. And the truth is, Xander, you make me happy. You make me want to embrace life again instead of just enduring it. Then may I court you properly, take you to dances and dinners, bring you flowers, write you letters even though we live in the same house." There was a vulnerability in his eyes that touched her deeply. "Yes," she said simply. "I would like that very much." He took her hand, raised it to his lips, and kissed it gently. "You have given me new reasons to smile too, Beatrice. I did not realize how lonely I was until you arrived." They stood together in the moonlight, hands joined, and Beatrice felt something shift in her heart. The grief was still there, would always be a part of her, but it was no longer the only thing she felt. Now there was joy too, and hope, and the thrilling possibility of love. The courtship that followed was sweet and careful, both of them aware of the unusual circumstances but determined to do things right. Xander brought her wildflowers from the prairie, leaving them on her desk in the office. He carved out time to take her riding across the ranch, showing her his favorite spots and teaching her to sit a horse properly. He wrote her letters even though they saw each other every day, little notes expressing his feelings or sharing observations that he thought would make her smile. Beatrice baked his favorite desserts and left them covered on the kitchen table. She organized a surprise repair of his favorite saddle, which had been getting worn. She wrote him letters in return, opening her heart slowly but surely, letting him see her grief and her healing, her fears and her hopes. The ranch hands watched the developing romance with approval, pleased to see their boss happy and grateful that Beatrice had brought organization and efficiency to the operation. Even the normally gruff Frank mentioned to Xander that he had better not let her get away. September gave way to October, and the work of preparing for winter began in earnest. Cattle needed to be moved to winter pastures. Hay needed to be cut and stored. Equipment needed to be repaired and secured. The whole ranch became a hive of focused activity. Beatrice threw herself into helping wherever she could, learning new skills and proving herself capable and determined. She helped in the garden, preserving vegetables for winter. She learned basic veterinary care for cattle and horses. She even learned to shoot, practicing with Xander's rifle until she could hit targets consistently. "You are a natural ranch woman," Xander told her one afternoon as they rode back from checking fence lines. "It is as if you were meant to be here." "I am starting to feel that way too," she admitted. "Great Bend was home because it was all I knew. But this place, this ranch, with these people and this work and you, this feels like home in a deeper way. Like I finally found where I belong." One evening in late October, they sat together on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. Xander had been quiet all day, seemingly wrestling with something internal. "What is on your mind?" Beatrice asked finally. He turned to her, taking both her hands in his. "I love you, Beatrice. I am deeply, completely, irrevocably in love with you. I know we have not been courting long, and I know you are still healing from your brother's death. But I cannot keep this inside anymore. I want a future with you. I want to fall asleep beside you every night and wake up next to you every morning. I want to build this ranch together, build a family together, build a life together. Will you marry me?" Tears sprang to Beatrice's eyes, but they were happy tears. "Yes. Yes, Xander, I will marry you. I love you too. I did not think I could feel this way again, did not think I deserved to after losing Daniel. But you showed me that life goes on, that there is still beauty and joy to be found. You kept your promise. You gave me new reasons to smile." He pulled her close and kissed her, soft and sweet and full of promise. When they finally pulled apart, both were grinning like fools. "When?" he asked. "How soon can we marry?" "As soon as you would like. I do not need a big wedding, just something simple with the people we care about. We could go into Great Bend this weekend, talk to Reverend Mitchell, have the wedding before winter truly sets in." And so they did. The following Saturday they rode into town and met with the Reverend, who was delighted by their news. They set the wedding for the first weekend in November, giving them 2 weeks to prepare. Beatrice wrote letters to distant relatives who would not be able to attend, but should be informed. She worked with Hannah to alter a dress into something suitable for a wedding. She made lists and plans. balancing her excitement with the practical needs of organizing a ceremony and celebration. Xander built new furniture for their bedroom, wanting everything to be perfect for when Beatrice moved from her separate room into his. He arranged for a minister from a neighboring town to perform the ceremony since Reverend Mitchell would be attending as a guest. He ordered special supplies for a wedding feast. The ranch hands pitched in enthusiastically, cleaning and decorating the main house, helping with preparations, offering advice and good-natured teasing. The whole place buzzed with happy anticipation. The night before the wedding, Beatrice visited Daniel's grave one last time. Xander had offered to come with her, but she needed to do this alone. She knelt before the wooden cross, touching the carved letters of his name. "I am getting married tomorrow, Daniel," she said softly. "To a good man, someone I think you would have liked. Someone who treats me well and makes me happy. I hope you are at peace wherever you are. I hope you know that I will never forget you, that you will always be my brother and I will always love you. But I am moving forward with my life now. I am choosing happiness. I think you would want that for me." The wind whispered through the grass, and Beatrice chose to believe it was Daniel's way of giving his blessing. The wedding day dawned clear and beautiful, one of those perfect autumn days when the air is crisp, but the sun is warm. The ceremony was held at the ranch rather than in town, with the entire population of the place in attendance plus friends from Great Bend and neighboring ranches. Beatrice wore a simple but elegant dress of cream-colored cotton, with her mother's cameo at her throat and wildflowers in her hair. She walked down the makeshift aisle on Frank's arm, since there was no father or brother to give her away. But the foreman had become like family over the past months, and it felt right to have him there. Xander waited at the front, looking handsome in his best suit, his eyes shining with love and barely contained emotion. When Beatrice reached him and took his hands, she saw tears on his cheeks and felt her own eyes well up in response. The ceremony was brief, but heartfelt. They exchanged vows they had written themselves, promising to love and support each other through whatever life brought. They exchanged simple gold bands, and when the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Xander kissed her with such joy and tenderness that everyone watching felt it. The celebration that followed was raucous and wonderful. There was music and dancing, abundant food and drink, speeches and toasts and laughter. Beatrice danced with Xander and with Frank and with Carlos and with half a dozen others. She ate cake that Hannah had made and accepted congratulations from what felt like half of Kansas. As the sun began to set, and the party showed no signs of slowing, Xander leaned in close to whisper in her ear. "What do you say we sneak away to our room, Mrs. Graves?" She grinned at the use of her new name. "I say that sounds perfect, Mr. Graves." They slipped away hand in hand while the party continued below, climbing the stairs to their bedroom. Xander had lit candles throughout the room, casting everything in soft golden light. Fresh flowers sat on the dresser and the bed had been made up with new linens. "Welcome home," Xander said softly. Beatrice turned to him, cupping his face in her hands. "I am home. Finally, truly home." Their wedding night was tender and passionate, a physical expression of the love that had been building between them for months. Afterward, they lay tangled together, talking softly about their future and their dreams. "I want children," Beatrice said. "I always thought I would have them with Daniel around, being the best uncle in the world. It hurts that he will not get to meet them, but I still want them." "So do I," Xander agreed, stroking her hair. "A whole houseful of them if we are lucky." Boys and girls, running wild across the ranch, learning to ride and rope and read. "And when they are older, we will tell them about the day we met, about how their father found their mother crying at a cemetery and offered to give her reasons to smile." and how their mother took that chance and changed their father's life completely. They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, peaceful and happy and full of hope for the future. The first winter of their marriage was cold but cozy. They spent long evenings by the fire, reading aloud to each other or playing cards or simply talking. Xander taught Beatrice to play chess, and she taught him to play the piano on the instrument they had hauled in from Great Bend as a wedding gift to themselves. The ranch work continued at a slower pace, focused on maintaining the livestock through the winter months. Beatrice continued managing the office and accounts, and under her careful stewardship, the ranch became more profitable than it had been in years. In the spring, Beatrice discovered she was pregnant. They shared the news with the ranch hands over dinner one evening, and the celebration was nearly as enthusiastic as the wedding had been. Everyone had an opinion on baby names and child rearing, and Beatrice found herself both overwhelmed and touched by their investment in her growing family. "Are you hoping for a boy or girl?" Frank asked. "Healthy," Beatrice said immediately. "Beyond that, I do not care." "I would love a daughter," Xander admitted. "A little girl with her mother's eyes and determination." As it turned out, he got his wish. In October of 1879, almost exactly a year after he had proposed, Beatrice gave birth to a healthy baby boy with dark hair and his father's storm-gray eyes. "A son," Xander breathed, holding the tiny bundle with careful reverence. "We have a son, Beatrice." "What should we name him?" she asked, exhausted but happy. They had discussed many names over the months but never quite settled on one. Now, looking at their newborn son, Xander said, "Daniel. We should name him Daniel, after your brother. He was a good man who died protecting others. I would be honored for our son to carry his name." Beatrice felt tears stream down her face, but they were tears of joy and healing. "Daniel Graves. Yes, that is perfect." Little Daniel was an easy baby, healthy and happy and curious about the world from his first days. The ranch hands doted on him shamelessly, taking turns holding him and entertaining him and teaching him things no baby possibly needed to know yet. Frank carved him a set of wooden blocks. Carlos made him a tiny stuffed horse. Tommy became his favorite person to give him bottle feedings. Beatrice returned to her work in the office once she had recovered from childbirth, often with baby Daniel sleeping in a basket beside her desk. She learned to balance motherhood and her ranch duties, finding satisfaction in both roles. When Daniel was 6 months old, they traveled to Great Bend so he could be christened at the church where Beatrice and her brother had grown up. Afterward, she took Xander and their son to the cemetery. "Daniel," she said softly, kneeling before her brother's grave with her own Daniel in her arms, "I want you to meet your nephew. We named him after you because you were brave and good and kind, and we hope he grows up to have those same qualities. I am happy now. I have found love and built a family. I will never forget you, but I have moved forward like you would have wanted. Thank you for being my brother. Thank you for all the years we had together." Xander stood beside her, one hand on her shoulder, as she said her final goodbye to the all-consuming grief that had once defined her. It would always be part of her story, but it was no longer the whole story. The years that followed were full and rich. The ranch continued to prosper under their combined management, expanding gradually but steadily. They hired more ranch hands as needed, built additional outbuildings, increased their herd size. Beatrice's organizational skills and attention to detail complemented Xander's practical knowledge and leadership, making them a formidable team. 2 years after Daniel's birth, Beatrice had a daughter they named Sarah after Xander's mother. She had her mother's honey-colored hair and a personality that was equal parts sweet and stubborn. Another 2 years brought twin boys, Matthew and Michael, who kept everyone on their toes with their energy and mischief. The house that had once felt too big for a lonely bachelor now rang with the sounds of children laughing and playing, of life being lived fully and joyfully. Beatrice often caught herself smiling at nothing in particular, just generally happy with the life they had built. The ranch hands who had been there from the beginning became like family. Frank eventually retired, but stayed on living in a small house on the property, insisting he had nowhere else he would rather be. Tommy married a girl from Great Bend and brought her to work as the ranch cook, freeing up Beatrice and Xander from that daily duty. Carlos became the head horse trainer, developing a breeding program that became regionally famous. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Xander took Beatrice riding out to the spot where he had first told her he loved her. The children were being watched by Tommy's wife and the other ranch hands, giving them a rare afternoon alone. "Can you believe it has been 10 years?" Beatrice asked, leaning back against him as they sat together looking out over the grasslands. "Sometimes it feels like a lifetime, and sometimes it feels like yesterday that I found you at that cemetery," Xander replied. "Do you ever regret it, saying yes when I asked you to come here?" "Never. Not once. You saved my life, Xander. You gave me reasons to smile when I thought I would never be happy again. You gave me love and family and purpose. How could I possibly regret any of that? I saved your life, but you transformed mine. I was so lonely before you came, even if I did not want to admit it. I was just going through the motions, building something but never really enjoying it. You made me remember how to be happy. You made this house a home." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sun move across the sky and the cattle graze peacefully in the distance. "You still miss him?" Xander asked gently. "Daniel. Every day," Beatrice admitted, "but it does not hurt the way it used to. Now when I think of him, I mostly remember the good times. His laugh, his kindness, the way he would get excited about a new woodworking project. I am glad our Daniel is carrying on his name and will hear stories about the uncle he never got to meet. He would be proud of you. Proud of the life you have built, the family you have raised. I think so too." She turned in his arms to face him. "Thank you, Xander, for everything, for seeing me that day, for stopping when you could have just ridden past, for offering me a chance at a new life, for loving me through my grief and beyond it, for giving me these 10 wonderful years and 4 beautiful children, for being exactly the partner I needed. The honor has been all mine, Mrs. Graves." He kissed her softly. "Here is to 10 more years, and 10 after that, and as many as we are blessed to have together." They rode back to the ranch as the sun began to set, back to the house full of children and noise and love, back to the life they had built together from grief and loneliness and a chance encounter in a cemetery. Years continued to pass in their satisfying rhythm. The children grew, each developing their own personalities and interests. Young Daniel showed his uncle's mechanical aptitude, always taking things apart to see how they worked. Sarah had her mother's head for numbers and her father's love of horses. The twins were inseparable, partners in both work and mischief. The ranch continued to thrive, becoming one of the most successful operations in central Kansas. Beatrice and Xander reinvested profits into improvements, into better breeding stock, into caring for their workers and their land. They became pillars of the community, known for their fairness and generosity. When Great Bend built a new school, they were major donors. When neighboring ranches struggled through bad years, Xander offered help without expecting repayment. When families needed work, Beatrice found positions for them. They remembered what it was like to struggle, to lose everything, and they tried to ease that burden for others when they could. On what would have been Daniel Thompson's 50th birthday, the family made a trip to Great Bend. The wooden cross that had marked his grave had been replaced years ago with a proper stone marker that Beatrice and Xander had commissioned. The cemetery was well maintained now, with flowers planted and pathways cleared. Their children placed wildflowers on the grave of the uncle they had heard so many stories about. Young Daniel, now 20 years old and every bit as fine a man as his namesake, said a prayer. Sarah, 18 and about to leave for school in Kansas City, read a poem she had written. The twins, 16 and already showing promise as capable ranch hands, stood respectfully silent. "Your sacrifice mattered," Beatrice said to her brother's memory. "It mattered to me, to everyone you saved that day, and to everyone who came after. My children exist because you existed, because you taught me about courage and kindness. The world is better because you were in it, however briefly." Xander stood beside his wife, his arm around her waist, as she said goodbye once again to her brother. After all these years, he could still see the ghost of that grieving woman he had found here so long ago, but she was buried deep beneath layers of happiness and healing. The woman beside him now was confident, accomplished, loved and loving. She had found her way back from the darkness and built a life full of light. That evening, back at the ranch, the whole family gathered for dinner. It had become tradition to share stories about Daniel Thompson on this day, to keep his memory alive for the younger generation. They talked about his woodworking, his bravery, his laugh. They talked about what he might have thought of the ranch, of his nieces and nephews, of how the world had changed. "Tell us again how you and Papa met," Sarah asked, even though she had heard the story dozens of times. Beatrice and Xander exchanged a smile, the same one they always shared when this request came up. "Your father saw me crying over Uncle Daniel's grave," Beatrice began. "I was lost in grief, could not see any way forward, and this cowboy stopped his horse and came to talk to me. He said, 'Let me give you new reasons to smile,'" young Daniel continued, knowing the story by heart. "And I did not believe him at first," Beatrice admitted. "How could I smile when I had lost everything? But he was patient. He offered me work and a fresh start. He showed me that life still had beauty and purpose. He taught me that grief and joy could exist together, that honoring those we have lost does not mean we cannot embrace those who are here. Your mother transformed this place," Xander added. "She brought organization and efficiency, yes, but more than that, she brought warmth and life. She made this ranch a home. She gave me reasons to smile too." "And then you fell in love," Sarah said with the romantic enthusiasm of 18. "And then we fell in love," Xander confirmed, reaching across the table to take his wife's hand. "Best decision I ever made, stopping at that cemetery. Best decision she ever made, saying yes to a new start. Best decision we ever made, building this life together," Beatrice finished. The twins groaned good-naturedly at their parents' display of affection, but everyone was smiling. This was their origin story, the foundation on which their family had been built. A moment of grief transformed into a lifetime of joy. Later, after the children had gone to their rooms and the house had grown quiet, Beatrice and Xander sat together on the porch as they had countless times before. The stars were brilliant in the clear Kansas sky, and the night air was cool and sweet. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had not stopped that day?" Beatrice asked. "Sometimes. I suppose I would still be here, still running the ranch, still living a decent life, but it would not have been this life. It would not have had you and the children. It would have been emptier, lonelier, less meaningful." He pulled her closer. "What about you? What do you think would have happened?" "I do not know. Maybe I would have eventually found my way back to some kind of normalcy. Maybe I would have stayed lost in grief. I do not like to think about it too much because I am so grateful for what actually happened. You saved me, Xander. In every way a person can be saved. We saved each other, he corrected gently. You showed me what I was missing. You filled spaces in my life I did not even know were empty. We are better together than either of us could have been alone. They sat in peaceful silence, comfortable with each other in the way that only comes from years of true partnership. Tomorrow would bring more work, more decisions, more challenges. But they would face it together as they had faced everything for the past 21 years. I love you, Beatrice said simply. I love you too. More today than yesterday, less than tomorrow. It was a line he had said so often over the years that it had become their private motto, a reminder that their love continued to grow and deepen with time. The years continued to unfold in their satisfying rhythm. Young Daniel took over more of the ranch operations as Xander began to slow down, not from lack of ability but from a desire to spend more time with Beatrice and to be present for their younger children. Sarah returned from school with a teaching certificate and opened a school on the ranch property, educating not just her brothers but children from neighboring ranches and families. The twins became skilled cattlemen, eventually buying land adjacent to the home ranch to start their own operation. Grandchildren arrived, bringing new energy and joy to the house. Beatrice loved being a grandmother, loved watching Xander with the little ones. He had always been a wonderful father, but there was something special about seeing him with his grandchildren, patient and playful in ways his younger self might not have managed. On their 30th anniversary, the children and grandchildren organized a celebration that brought together everyone who had ever worked on the ranch or been touched by Beatrice and Xander's generosity. It was held in the large barn, decorated with flowers and lanterns, with music and dancing and enough food to feed an army. Frank was there, now ancient but still sharp, sitting in a place of honor and telling stories about the early days. Carlos brought 3 generations of his family. Tommy's children, grown now with families of their own, helped coordinate the whole event. I cannot believe you all did this, Beatrice said, looking around at the crowded barn with tears in her eyes. You have given so much to all of us, young Daniel said. This is just a small way to show our appreciation and love. The highlight of the evening was when Sarah stood up to give a speech. 30 years ago, my father made a choice to stop at a cemetery and speak to a grieving woman. My mother made a choice to accept his offer of a fresh start. Those 2 choices, made in moments, shaped not just their lives but all of ours. They built this ranch, this family, this community. They showed us what it means to choose love over loneliness, hope over despair, action over paralysis. They taught us that it is never too late to start over, never too late to help someone, never too late to choose happiness. Thank you, Mama and Papa, for everything you have given us and for the example you have set. May we all be as brave and as kind as you have been. There was not a dry eye in the barn as Sarah finished. Beatrice and Xander stood together, hand in hand as always, overwhelmed by the love in that room. I have no grand speech prepared, Xander said when the applause finally died down. I will just say this. 30 years ago I was a lonely man with a successful ranch but an empty heart. Then I met Beatrice and everything changed. She brought light into my life. She gave me a family, a purpose beyond just making money, a reason to be my best self. Every good thing in my life can be traced back to that day in the cemetery when I chose to stop and speak to her. If I have helped any of you, if I have shown kindness or generosity, it is because she taught me how. She is the heart of this family and this ranch. And he is its backbone and strength, Beatrice added. He promised to give me new reasons to smile, and he has kept that promise every single day for 30 years. He showed me that life continues, that joy is still possible even after devastating loss. He taught me that we honor those we have lost not by stopping our own lives but by living them fully. I love you all, and I am so grateful for this beautiful life we have built together. The celebration continued late into the night, but eventually Beatrice and Xander slipped away to their room, wanting a few moments alone together. "Can you believe it has been 30 years?" Beatrice asked, the same question she had asked on their 10th anniversary and their 20th. "Sometimes yes, sometimes no," Xander replied, giving his usual answer. "What I can believe is how lucky I am, how blessed we are. 30 years with you, Beatrice, and I still look forward to seeing you every morning. I still enjoy your company every evening. I still love you more than I thought it was possible to love another person. I feel the same way. You are my partner, my love, my best friend. You have given me a life beyond my wildest dreams. That grief-stricken woman in the cemetery could never have imagined all this. Could never have believed such happiness was possible. But here we are," Xander said softly. "Here we are." They settled into bed, into the comfortable positions they had found over 3 decades of sleeping side by side. Through the open window came the sounds of their family still celebrating below, laughter and music floating up into the night. "I hope they have this someday," Beatrice murmured drowsily. "Our children and grandchildren. I hope they find partners who make them this happy. I hope they build lives this full." "If we have taught them anything, they will," Xander assured her. "They know what real love looks like. They know what a true partnership involves. They will choose well." The years that followed were gentler, slower. Xander and Beatrice gradually turned over more of the ranch operations to young Daniel and his siblings, transitioning into advisory roles rather than day-to-day management. They spent more time with grandchildren, teaching them to ride and raid, sharing stories and wisdom, being the presence they wanted to be in those young lives. They took trips occasionally, traveling to Kansas City and even once to Chicago, seeing things they had never thought they would see. But they always came back to the ranch, to the land that had been their foundation, to the life they had built there. When Xander's health began to decline in his early 70s, Beatrice cared for him with the same dedication he had once shown her. She was there for his good days and bad days, adjusting their life to accommodate his limitations but never making him feel less capable or valued. "I am sorry," he said one afternoon as she helped him to a chair on the porch. "I hate that I cannot do everything I used to do. I hate being a burden." "You are not a burden," Beatrice said firmly. "You are my husband. You took care of me when I needed it most. Now I take care of you. That is what partners do. And besides, you are still doing things. You are still reading to the grandchildren, still advising Daniel on ranch business, still making me laugh every day. Just because your body is slowing does not mean your mind or your heart is diminished." "What did I do to deserve you?" he asked, cupping her face in his weathered hand. "You stopped at a cemetery when you did not have to. You reached out to a stranger in pain. You kept your promise to give me reasons to smile." She kissed his palm gently. "And you have continued keeping that promise for 43 years. They had recently celebrated their 43rd anniversary, a quiet affair with just family, simple and perfect. Xander lived to see his 75th birthday, surrounded by children, grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren who had recently arrived. He was weak by then, but his mind remained sharp and his spirit strong. "Promise me something," he said to Beatrice one evening as they sat together watching the sunset. "Anything," she replied. "Promise me you will not shut down when I am gone. Promise me you will keep living fully, keep being present for our family, keep finding joy. I cannot stand the thought of you going back to that woman I found at the cemetery, lost in grief with no way forward." "I promise," she said, though the words nearly choked her. She could not imagine life without him, could not fathom facing each day without his steady presence beside her. "And remember, my beautiful Beatrice, what I have told you so many times. Death is not an ending. It is a transition. I will be waiting for you however long it takes. Your brother will be there too, and when you finally join us, we will all be together again." Xander died peacefully in his sleep 3 weeks later, with Beatrice holding his hand. The grief that crashed over her was immense, but it was different from the grief she had felt when Daniel died. That grief had been compounded by loneliness and hopelessness. This grief, while devastating, existed alongside gratitude for 43 years of love, alongside the knowledge that she had been blessed beyond measure. The funeral was attended by hundreds of people whose lives had been touched by Xander Graves. The church in Great Bend could not hold everyone who wanted to pay respects. They spoke of his kindness, his integrity, his generosity, his leadership. They spoke of the legacy he left behind in his children and grandchildren, and in the ranch that bore his name. Beatrice stood surrounded by her family, drawing strength from them as they drew strength from her. Young Daniel, now in his 40s and every bit the man his father had been, kept a steady arm around his mother. Sarah spoke at the service, her voice breaking only once as she remembered her father. The twins, solid and capable men in their 30s, served as pallbearers alongside Xander's grandchildren. They buried him in the Great Bend Cemetery, not far from where Daniel Thompson rested. Beatrice stood between the two graves of the men who had shaped her life, feeling the weight of loss but also the blessing of having known such good men. "Thank you," she whispered to both of them. "Daniel, for being my brother and teaching me about courage. Xander, for being my husband and teaching me about love. I will carry you both with me for whatever time I have left." True to her promise to Xander, Beatrice did not shut down in her grief. She continued to be present for her family, to offer guidance to young Daniel as he ran the ranch, to teach her grandchildren and great-grandchildren. She spent her days in the office still, keeping the books with the same attention to detail she always had. She spent her evenings on the porch, remembering and honoring but also living. She told stories about Xander constantly, keeping his memory alive for the younger generations who had not known him long. She shared the story of how they met, of his promise to give her new reasons to smile, of how that promise had shaped their entire life together. "Your grandfather saw someone hurting and chose to help," she would tell her grandchildren. "He could have ridden past. Most people would have. But he stopped, and that choice changed everything. Remember that. Remember that we all have the power to change lives with simple acts of kindness." Beatrice lived to the remarkable age of 86, remaining sharp and engaged until nearly the end. Her family surrounded her in her final days, filling the bedroom with love and memories. "Are you afraid?" Sarah asked, holding her mother's hand. "No," Beatrice said honestly. "I have had a wonderful life. I have loved and been loved. I have raised good children who are raising good children of their own. I have built something that will last beyond me, and soon I will see your father again and my brother. What is there to be afraid of?" She died peacefully on a spring morning in 1923, 45 years after a cowboy had found her crying at a grave and offered to give her new reasons to smile. The family buried her beside Xander, under the Kansas sky she had loved. Her great-great-grandchildren would visit those graves decades later, hearing the story of the woman who had lost everything and rebuilt a life more beautiful than she had imagined possible. They would hear about the cowboy who stopped when he did not have to, who reached out when others might have passed by, who saw a woman in pain and chose to help. They would hear about promises kept and lives transformed, about grief survived and love discovered. They would hear about new reasons to smile and old griefs laid to rest. And they would carry that story forward, a testament to the power of kindness, the resilience of the human spirit, and the transformative nature of love. The Graves family ranch continued to thrive, generation after generation, built on the foundation that Beatrice and Xander had laid so many years before. Their graves stood side by side in the Great Bend Cemetery, with Daniel Thompson's just a few feet away. 3 stones marking 3 lives, connected by choice and chance and love that transcended death. And on Beatrice's stone, beneath her name and dates, was carved a simple epitaph that captured the essence of her remarkable life. She found new reasons to smile and gave them to generations.